One. And today, well, before we even start, what have we got going on your couch?
Well, all right. So what we got going on is this is my climbing bag. Yeah. And I love it. It's super special to me. I don't know why, because I'm not a super gear hog, but I like to buy one of a thing and then it's my thing and I love it. Does that make any sense?
It makes about 1,000,000,000% sense. Right?
Okay.
Right. You started talking about this, and the first thing that came to mind for me was that, oh no, we're not going to talk about Philosopher Swordsmen for the rest of the podcast. We're just going to talk about ancient stories about people naming their cool stuff things. And
yeah, right. Well, no, because we're going to talk about Philosopher Swordsmen because that's too important.
That's important. But go ahead.
Yeah. But I'm so close to finishing this. I have 3 more stitches, so I was going to do it. And anyways, I thought it was a nice thing to start out talking about because I have this mixed feeling, and this happens in martial arts too. So because I don't like to have a lot of things, but I like to have one nice thing, then that means for a half a second, my things are nice. And then because it's the only one I have, it gets a lot of use.
Mm.
And I always have this super mixed feeling about it of being fuck yeah, I'm using my thing. Look at me. I'm a real whatever. I'm a real climber because I'm using my thing. And then the other part of me is my bag got hurt. So when I was climbing in Vegas, I was climbing on sandstone, which is very gritty and grippy, and that's super cool. But because of having to scramble up these boulders and then scramble back down to get to the climb, and just the way it was, I would have to sit down on a boulder and then jump down, sit down, jump down, sit down, jump down. And so the bottom of my bag got scraped and scraped and scraped and scraped and scraped, and I wore holes in it.
Mm.
Which is cool, again, from a feeling like I'm a real person doing the real thing and all that. And then sucks because there's holes in the bottom of my special to me bag. So I'm patching it because I'm that kind of nerd. So
what kind of fabric is the bag made from? And then what kind of fabric did you use? Does it matter? Is it just whatever?
It's just whatever, it's called ripstop, right? And it's what they make hammocks out of or tents or, you know what I mean? So it's slightly waterproof, and if it gets cut, it doesn't fray, right? So there are holes, but the holes aren't, even if I hadn't done anything, it would still probably truck along for a long time. Just fine, just because of the nature of the fabric. But then also, I know that I want to use this bag for 10 years. So I decided now is the time to patch it when there's little holes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then did you then get ripstop fabric to patch it with? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, there's all kinds of places you can order it from. It's not expensive. And since, the styling of the bag is obviously very colorful, everything is a different color and a different fabric, which is part of the reason why I really liked it. So I ordered very small amounts of 3 different colors of ripstop so that I could patch it with
character,
all different other colors,
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm super pumped about that. And that is the last stitch. So now I can look at you.
Nice. I also like your shirt.
Yeah, this is from a long time ago, but if nobody knows, it's it's a play. Oh no. Okay. Sorry, my computer acted like it was going to go to sleep or something. It's a play off of the band Danzig's logo, but it says pseudo Peter von Danzig. Because I'm a nerd. And the best part is normies will totally walk up to me when I'm wearing this and be like, I fucking love dancing. And I'm like, me too.
Let's go. You just go along your merry way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So today we have an important topic. Not to say that most of the stuff that we talk about isn't important, but it does get kind of like meandering, which has always been the point, right?
Yeah.
From the inception of this discussion.
Yeah.
But today we're going to focus our attention on some like a general topic, and then maybe some specific branches.
Okay, keep talking. I'm getting my coffee. Keep going.
Yeah. So we're thinking of what, and we've talked about this before, like martial arts as a practice, what it is that people are looking to achieve, the nature of sport in the context of martial arts, the nature of contest in the context of martial arts. You know, which aren't the same thing, but there's no, it's not clear that when we're drawing the borders around what we might call the domain of martial arts, or even if you don't even want to call it martial arts, which is something that you were flirting with for many years now. You've been flirting with for many years now.
Sure.
Actually, have we got into that? Have you ever like made your pronouncement, or are you still sort of?
I mean, I don't need to make a pronouncement about it, because like the point of conversation, which this is going to go to it, but the point of conversation, right, is to make yourself understood. So just because I have a nerdy understanding of what martial means doesn't mean anyone else does. So, you know, unless I'm going to re-educate the entire English-speaking world, there's no point in belaboring it other than in my own brain.
Right. I don't think it's, well, I wouldn't say it's harmful to just reference like that there might be a distinction, or that you could have a distinction if you wanted to, and maybe how you frame that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, so when you look at like medieval ideas of Mars, Mars is war, and in that context, it means like burning down villages, murdering babies, raping women, stealing shit, absolute plunder, horror show, nastiness, right?
Oh, so that's stop there for a second. Let's think about that, right? So war has historically only ever been practiced in a very ritualized way. Not only ever, like there are lots of cases of war, formal war being practiced in sort of the way that you just described.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, amongst the civilized world, we might say, and by civilized world, what I mean specifically is, how do I put this? I mean, I mean formally organized society, right?
Sure.
So that's what I mean when I say civilized world. So I don't mean formally organized society that falls within the boundaries of what we regard as geographic Europe, or you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not.
Yeah.
I just mean
you're trying really hard not to be racist. You're not being racist.
Well, right. So like, so far as I understand, warfare across the globe has always been practiced in a way that's been very ritualized and very formalized, and wouldn't be an accurate representation of what was regarded as war by the Greeks and the Romans when they're talking about Ares and Mars, etc. Right?
Sure.
And so that's what they were regarding as war was sort of what we might think, what some people today might think of as like anarchy, right? Like just desolation, just like, does that make sense?
absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Like, yeah. Yeah, like no holds barred sort of idea, right?
Right. And sort of and the chaos that brings to, and it's sort of juxtaposed with the sense of civilization, or the sense of formally organized society, right? So it's
Yeah.
like war can mean two, like, countries fighting each other or whatever, two nations or two tribes or whatever, or it can mean the breakdown of society,
Right.
right?
Right.
The breakdown of law and order, the breakdown of, and the breakdown of systematic modes of developing relationships with our communities, right? All of those things. And so that's a very different thing than just saying, like, being on the battlefield, two armies coming together.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I mean, there's a lot of societal reasons why at the time and place where we see like these distinctions being important culturally, like, I mean, go listen to Murder Hobos, right? Like, if you want to get into like the details of that. But yeah, so that being accepted, when you look at, then if that's martial, then solar is what fencing falls under. Fencing and wrestling and all sorts of other things. But the things that we colloquially call martial arts actually fall under the purview of the sun, not Mars, right? So
right. And it's interesting because there's a sort of so there's a chaos in war, as we're describing it, when we regard it sort of as being martial or associated with Mars. There's a chaos involved there. And what we do with martial arts in the, like, today, in the 21st century, is we organize it, we systematize it. We systematize it. We create a method for training and development. We're taking the chaos out of it, or we're taking the chaos of the world and we're bringing it into our order of the and so and
well,
and so
and I would even like, that's one framing, like chaos versus order, and then another framing is fun versus no fun, right? There is no fun in war.
that's yeah, exactly, that's right. Yeah, right? There's no fun. That's the point of that association, right? Is that, and there's not, like, it's not random, right? Like, we know why war would lead to this state of catastrophe, right? This state of self-imposed catastrophe, because war sucks and it leads to conditions that create that type of environment. And, like, even when it's practiced in the most formally organized and ritualized way possible, people still experience, somebody will still experience a version of of that thing. But yeah, so anyway, okay, so we don't have to spend any more time on that. Just if you want to do more reading, there's lots of resources, and podcasts has already been mentioned. There's stuff on this stuff, and so yeah. So thinking about, we're going to call it martial arts because that's the word that exists,
again, to be understood, right?
Yeah. But so martial arts, there are several things that fall under the category of martial arts. So everything from Tai Chi, right? And the various Chinese traditional martial arts, to a lot of games to various, when we think of wrestling, we think of striking arts, we think of submission grappling, we think of sword play. And then all of these can be practiced in various contexts. They can be practiced in solo form. They can be practiced in paired form. They can be practiced in contests.
Right.
They can be practiced in sport. Right. Again, contest and sport are not the same thing.
Right.
And so I think the first question that we should ask ourselves is, or what do we think about the distinction, and why? I guess, part of this is stemming from this age-old question about the relationship of sport or performance, or performance in a context to performance in a contest to the practice of martial arts. We'll start there, right? So I'm interested in the necessity, or at least the projected necessity, by the movers of the community, right? By the movers of the dialogue and the dialectic, right? Towards looking at performance and contest as sort of the ultimate test of the efficacy of martial practice, right? So we'll just start there, and that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll open the floor. I've set the table. It's your turn.
Okay, because all right, so that's a whole thing, because efficacy.
Wait, and just to be clear, we're not even getting into sport yet. Like, so we're not even. All right, good. Okay.
We're not even there, because it doesn't matter, because efficacy implies a goal, right? And their efficacy at what? At getting me fit? At developing my hand-eye coordination? At kicking your ass in an octagon? At keeping myself safe because I live in the hood? Right? And the thing is for some reason, people want to rank those, and in order of coolness, goodness, virtue,
right? They like we associate these are various levels of virtue, right?
Right. Because people are like, oh, Tai Chi is bullshit. For what?
Right.
What is your goal? Right? If my goal is having insane body control and being able to do like wicked, strange, one-legged squat kick things with like masterful, right? Yeah. Masterful control of my body, Tai Chi is going to get me there. What is bullshit about it? Nothing. Right.
There's something else. I mean, and that's just the obvious one, right? So like,
it's easy because neither of us practice it.
So a very close very close family member to me is a practitioner of Tai Chi, and so she's been sharing. She's like really, really awesome because she shares. She will like share all this stuff about Tai Chi with me all the time.
Yeah.
She's just super enthusiastic, and it's infectious. So I become enthusiastic about the Tai Chi stuff, and so like I've been getting into Tai Chi, and it's not just her, right? Like we've had our mutual friend Lars is another practitioner of various traditional Chinese martial arts. Because Tai Chi sort of can be kind of a catch-all for all of it.
Yeah.
But they're all practiced in a similar, or there are all several like through lines in terms of the way that the big three traditional Chinese martial arts are practiced. But anyway, their framing right? So I think we've talked a little bit about Eastern versus Western framing, like metaphorical framing of body systems, right? Like meridians. Have we done like a deep dive on like those kinds of things? Like what's commonly in Western in Western, we'll say, medical circles is regarded as woo medicine, like Chinese medicine and stuff. They just have a different framing of our body systems, right? Of the way that our stuff is organized. And it breaks down if you treat it, if you don't treat it as the way that it's designed to be treated, right? Yeah, sure, it breaks down.
Right.
But there's a lot of interesting insights that come from that kind of thing. And the same with Tai Chi. So this really fun anecdote that was shared with me by my friend Sky was that somebody was doing Tai Chi and their instructor was trying to help them adopt a posture or move through a movement pattern or whatever. And she was like, the practitioner or the student was like, what muscle do I get? Like, am I supposed to be tightening my glutes, or am I supposed to be, whatever? Like, and the instructor was like, this is Tai Chi, right? Yeah. Like, we don't do that. Like what you're doing, we don't do that. Like this is a whole body. It's a whole body thing, right?
Love it.
Right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just such a wild, and like, of course, the discussion sort of continued in directions that could become embarrassing for people, but the bottom line is like that broke my brain, right? Like, it's like, oh, that's such an interesting way of thinking about holding my body and moving my body, is like, and not like mind muscle activation, but not in a particular muscle group, but like the whole body and connecting everything, right? Yeah. That's a real thing, right? So like we can, you can say, like that is an important insight that we get from the practice of Tai Chi that we wouldn't get elsewhere, and that we learn how to like think about the strength and structure in that type of attitude, right? Like think about the way that framing creates strength in your body, right? Soft strength, right? Like it's I don't know, it's really fascinating to me. So the bottom line is like there's real value there if we allow for a broader horizon with regards to what we're looking to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. And so, again, well, I mean, this is to the point of what we're talking about, but I, think about my martial practice, such as it is, to be something I want to be able to do no matter what specific detriments occur to my body, right? So it could just be, I'm just going to get old. Like that's a real fact. So even if I maintain myself to peak fucking Olympic level athletic performance, it's going to decline. Just a fact, right? So like I want to be able to do this just from being old, or if I end up in a wheelchair, or if my hand gets cut off, or right, which is going to require that certain goals that one might have for their practice are no longer achievable given that, right? So I'm looking for making my personal practice and my practice as someone who shares this practice with, as many people as I can, to make it available to as many people as I can, which means I have to have a broader mindset than maybe someone else would want to have, and that's, again, I'm not ranking that. It's just what is interesting and useful to me.
Right. I think of again, we've talked about all of this before, because as I'm cycling through the sort of ideas that come to mind, I'm recalling sitting here talking about them. Like any martial arts class that I've ever been to anywhere,
Yeah.
right? Everything from like kickboxing gyms that have literal UFC fighters in them, right?
Right.
To like traditional Chinese martial arts clubs that don't pay a fee to use the local community center, right?
Right.
Like every single one of them has had every level of practitioner, right? From the high level competitor who's interested in contests, who's interested not, and it doesn't have to be a sort of zero sum contest, right? It could be like there are other ways of competing with each other in this domain, but like everything from people who wanted to go fight in the cage in the UFC and have fought in the cage in the UFC, to people who are just there to like their doctor's like, you need heart health in your life, something that you can point at that's you can say like, that's for my heart.
Right. Yeah.
And so like I think that HEMA and historical fencing and our obsession with this question and just the nature of our geekiness has caused us
amateurnish, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, both of those things combined have led us to this like really bastardized sense of what's going on, whereas like everybody else has figured it out, right? Like everybody else has figured it out. Like, there are very occasionally there are centers in the world that are dedicated to high level performance, right?
Sure.
There are models that you can a high level performance in, like, it's a specialization. High level performance in competition is a specialization.
Thank you. Yes.
Right. And so yes, it's valuable that avenue be available to people who want to do that. And also, by the way, we're going to get into later, or maybe not today, but next time we're going to get into what the program for developing people in virtually every single one of those centers of specialization looks like, and what it might not look like.
Right.
But anyway, so but like everyone else, like aside from these centers, everyone else is just like, we're here to service like a lot of your needs, right?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's it. And yeah, like I'm thinking about like my judo club, right? It was a small judo club, but it was a dedicated space. People from that club had competed in the Olympics. That was a real pathway that club could provide, right? So, I'm not disparaging the fact that it happened to be a small town club. That doesn't matter, right? But there were people like literally the guy that had been undefeated in regional, meaning the entire Midwest, Chicago through Mexico, competitions. He trained there. He was always there. And there would be a 6-year-old in the same class.
Right.
And then all of us in between.
Right. So that kind of leads me to another question, because that reminds me of my experience recently when I visited Dustin in Oklahoma, and I visited his fencing club where I did some épée, which was wild and awesome. I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah.
But it was the same story. Like they were really impressive. They had a lot of people there that were very, very impressive fencers. Dustin has been an elite level competitor, or he has been an elite level competitor. He's been a high level competitor his entire life. And he goes to that gym, and then then he taught class with a bunch of kids that like couldn't do any of the movement patterns,
At all. Yeah.
at all, right? Like, and it's not even a thing, right? And so then that leads me to the next question, which is, so first of all, I think, you and I certainly agree, like the idea that performance in contest or performance in competition or performance in sport
Mhm.
is not the only, it's not the highest. There's it doesn't even make sense to rank that the highest of any, like it's a
value.
ridiculous idea to like call that like the peak or the pinnacle or the ultimate sort of expression of the thing, right? So is there value then for everybody to be on a journey together or share a space together, right? Or should we just take all the elite competitors and put them in the high, the high performance centers, and protect them from those of us who are looking to achieve something else with our practice, right?
Right. Make sure we don't drag them down with our shit technique.
Yeah, or whatever, right? Like, so it's like,
right. But I mean, there's like a weird fear of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to, I mean, I've heard people say shit like that, right? Like, yeah. I don't want people who are slow and old and disabled and whatever in my club, because I'm going to have to dumb everything down for them. And then I'm only going to be training at this dumbed down level. And then I won't be able to roll up to swordfish and win. Right. And it's their fault.
Right.
And I think, I think that's a real weak take. Again, because like having to roll with me didn't stop Matt from destroying literally everyone and being undefeated, right? Like, right. I didn't slow him down.
Right. I mean,
go ahead. And I was not, I was not that kind of judo player. I was not undefeated.
Right. Yeah. So like, I think for me, I have a sort of subversive goal, right, in my practice, which is like, yeah, I would like to see the people that are obsessed with, and maybe even like finding a tremendous amount of success in an approach that focuses almost single-mindedly on performance in contest or performance in sport. Mm-hmm. Like, I would like to see their horizon be broadened and to find more value, potentially find more value in ways that doesn't immediately or doesn't maybe directly translate to higher performance in contest or sport, right? Well, yeah, and
and it's because you are interested in being a philosopher swordsman, which means you are interested in the development of the whole person. And here's what happens that I see time and time again is these people who are single-mindedly thinking about high-level sportive performance in specific conditions that they have access to in HEMA. The first time they mess up their knee or mess up their shoulder or have a broken finger, they have an emotional fucking breakdown. Because suddenly they can't do the only reason they're there. Right? And I have dealt with and helped people deal with the emotional impact of injury. And being only focused on, can I out-time this guy because my sphere is better than his sphere or whatever, right? Someday it won't be. And if that's all you got, and you're tying the worth of your practice to that outcome. And I think that's really it.
Right.
You're gonna cry a lot. the first time you bust something, and you will bust something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, for sure. Like, and if you don't bust something, your just performance starts to atrophy. It's just it's a feature of our humanity. So like,
Yeah, but I mean,
get real with that.
but let's be real. You will bust something. This
Oh
is
yeah.
a ridiculously hard sport on the body, you know?
We got to be careful about. I got to stop you there because you said this is a
Okay.
hard sport, and
Yeah.
it's not a sport. We do not have a sport. We don't have a
Okay.
sport. There's no HEMA sport that doesn't exist.
Okay.
People, and that's a huge distinction. We might as well open that can of worms right now.
Well, deal with it. Yeah, let's go.
So like, a sport has rules,
Right.
and often, it has some unified body that formally organizes participation, right? Like, there's like we don't have a sport. This isn't a sport. No. We have a bunch of people who are yeah. What do we have?
Yeah, really, the queer adult kickball league or kickball league at my local park probably has more formal organization than HEMA does, right?
Right.
Like, isn't there like Quidditch? I'm pretty sure the Quidditch clubs have more formal organization. In fact, I know they do. It may be too much organization, but that's neither here nor there. Right? Yeah, like, I'm with you. Yeah.
And so this idea of like, so we as a community, as a community, right? The people who practice historical fencing and organize content or organize sportive contests, right? So yes. Like formally organized tournaments have adopted an approach that it gives a nod to the Philosopher Swordsmen, right?
Sure.
Because the approach that they've adopted is we're not interested in formalizing the rules of the game because we recognize that this thing that we're doing has more to offer than ultimate success in competition, right? Like what we're doing with historical fencing is bigger than like creating a system where we can establish a hierarchy of people who perform better or worse, right? That's why tournaments exist the way they do, right? In HEMA today, there are no rules. Like the Scandinavian, or not the Scandinavians, but the Europeans, including Scandinavians, but also like they've gone the sport road much more so than we have. Not all people who practice historical fencing in Europe have gone that road, but the people who do practice, like they have a very, how do I put it? They've created a sport, and it's great. I think it's great. I think that if you want to create a sport, then create a sport, right? And that's fine.
Yes.
But for that, like, you need consistent rules, right? You need consistent rules. You can't say, well, we have a different idea about what martial is, and so this cut has to be hard.
There you go.
Right, like, because that's right. That's what they're saying. Those are the nods that they're giving. They're literally saying those words.
Right, because it comes back to ranking the streets as to being the top rank.
Well, sure, right. And so like, but that's not what a sport. Like a sport is something that has rules that everyone knows, and that you develop the practice around those rules.
Yes. I mean, listen, I can't help but think of like having a conversation. I've probably told this story on the pod, but I'm doing it again. A conversation with my dad about like, I don't remember what it is. Let's pretend it's like shitty hand sniping that I was having a feel about in that moment, right? Mm-hmm. And my dad goes, well, is it against the rules? And I was like, no. And he was like, then why the fuck aren't you doing it if it's so effective?
Right.
Right? And I was like, because it's not the feel I want. And my feels are offended. Right? And like, but to my dad, like, heck yes. For the sport is about the rules define the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore,
and the practice is developed around it, and the meta is determined by it, right?
Right. You absolutely hold on to your timeouts until your guys need a rest, right? You absolutely play these games of how many you have and where you're doing them and all this, even though theoretically a timeout probably originated from like, oh man, our guy's hurt. Let's make sure everybody's okay. Everybody okay? Okay, let's,
Right.
Right. But it isn't that now because it's all about the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, okay, so we don't have a sport, at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
We don't have anything that can be regarded as a sport.
Given that definition, I'm here. Keep going.
Well, and this is where, a lot of our safety concerns come from, because we don't have a sport, we don't have a way of determining whether or not, like what gear is appropriate, right, in terms of safety, right? Are we going to allow people to hit? What's that?
What techniques are appropriate? What experience is appropriate? What footing is appropriate?
Right, exactly. Let's think about that notion for a second. There's a new. So historically there was a tiered system in terms of entrance to tournaments, sort of bracketing them out into various tiers. And what they looked at was your medaling in some kind of tournament.
Right.
But there are no rules. There's no consistency. So what, like, you having a gold medal in some tournament means nothing in the broader scheme of what it is to do this practice that we do. And so and it just doesn't even make any sense, even on the surface of it.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. So I want you to talk more about, well, all right. So we've talked about what we can be doing. We've talked about what a hyper focus on tournament is, and then you mentioned sport, and I derailed your.
That's okay. Thought. That's what we're here for.
But
that's what this is about.
I want you to continue talking about what you were talking about before I did that.
Well, we'd have to replay so I would know what I was saying. It's long gone. So that's not going to happen. But so philosopher swordsman. So what is a philosopher swordsman, James?
That's what you were talking about.
Oh, that's what I was talking. Okay. All right. Right. Well, oh man, that's again so much. But I think the interest for me again is in developing a holistic human, such as it is, right? So yes, it's cool if somebody can go do well at a local tournament. I mean, I'm fucking proud when any of my people do well. That's great. I also want them to develop mental and emotional resilience in the face of just life shit they're going to run into. Right? As through this practice. And so like part of that might be for someone like their cardiologist was like, man, you're going to die. And if I can help them develop the mental emotional resilience to get their physical under control, that'd be fucking cool. Right? Boy, I'd be way prouder of keeping somebody alive an extra 10 years than I would be of somebody getting a gold medal for me. Right? And so, and I think I have an interest in this. I have an interest in this in a way that lets me approach a framework for understanding all the slings and arrows that life brings to you.
Yeah.
So, well, we've said before on this podcast, there's only one art, right? Like once you get one, you got it.
Right. And it's like, so you and I have talked through so many domains in our lives that we've been looking to develop ourselves in, right? Yeah. So everything from climbing to playing music, to riding horses, to playing fighting games, to just having relationships with real humans, right? Mm-hmm. And everywhere in between. And we haven't even gotten to the subject of fencing, except that both of us have consistently used the shared language, the shared framework for understanding the world that we have been enculturated into because we are students of this particular practice of martial arts with what I regard as an exceedingly robust intellectual framework for interpreting the world, right? You know, and
yeah, I mean, that's it. So like a friend of mine had a situation where I'm making it more vague, where she has had a situation with a bureaucracy, right? Where she signed up for a thing and signed a contract, understanding things were going to go a certain way. And then they're like, but now you need to provide more money, right? And because we've all run into these sorts of scenarios where you sign up for a thing thinking it's one thing and suddenly it's this other thing, right? And you can get stuck in the emotion of that, right? Especially if you're money insecure, right? Somebody starts to F with your money, like that gets to all of us real quick. And so because she also studies this art, I immediately broke into like, no, listen, you didn't know you had entered the ring, but you have. They have made it clear with this is their Vorschlag, right? This is what's going down. You need to like clarify yourself as to your situation. You didn't choose it, but you're here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like started like just diving into like a fencing exchange framework. And it helped her at least briefly come out of fight, flight, panic.
Right.
And go, oh, there's a framework for dealing with this. I understand. Okay, so, right? This is the way they came at me. They threw my contract at me. That means I need to gather, all of these details and this and that, and this is my next step. And like, yeah, right? Instead of being in the emotional panic. And so this is what I mean about, and I think you do too, James, about once you have the framework and the concepts and you understand that like all of your experiences in the world can fall into this, whether you're working, well, basically whenever you're working with another living thing, even if that living thing is your own self, right? So you can drop into this framework to help you make sense of what's happening and to think through how you're going to go forwards.
Right. And that's really important because it reminds me that all of life is a metaphor, right? All of life, all of our understanding of the world, even these concrete things that this is a metaphor. This isn't real. This is a metaphor.
It absolutely is.
And so like
the most freeing idea ever created. I love it.
Well, and so if that's true, which it's true, science has already said it's true. So if you want to, like, the only possible objection to it is, well, science, and science is on my side on this. So it's over. We're done. So if it's true that it's all a metaphor, then there's no better way to approach the world than the metaphor that you use to guide your behavior, or the framework of metaphor that you use to guide your behavior, right? Like that's how we get through the world. What truth is just, it's just our sense of the world, right? As manifested through our experience and what we've learned happens when we do things, right? Like that's what it boils down to. But whenever we go ahead.
Yeah, you expect a thing to happen in your mind. You think it's going to go like this, and it does, and you say, it's true.
It's true, right? And it's not untrue. It's not true until the moment that you see that there is a deviation. And then it's not even not true sometimes. Sometimes you got to say, oh, I have to like reframe the way I was thinking about those words, because in order for them to be true, they have to mean these other things.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even say like, oh, my framework is wrong, right? It's just not nuanced.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. Right? I just have to adjust my framework, right?
Exactly.
Which is beautiful and also sometimes problematic.
Well, but it's our humanity, right? So like we can't escape that. It is problematic. It's hugely problematic. But I don't know, we do pretty well. We get pretty far with it. And so like, okay, right. So what we're doing is we're developing a framework for understanding the world, for accounting for the variation of the world, and and for using to guide our behavior, right? And then as we encounter more and more things, we adjust it, or we make it more nuanced, or sometimes we just apply it and it just works magically. Because we intuited the variation away, and we already accounted for it,
Right.
And so like maybe that's what the practice is there for. So you were talking about climbing, and we were talking about like the value in the practice beyond like the ultimate expression being the highest level or elite level performance, right? Or like judging your performance based on and like you don't have any ambition to be in a
Red Bull isn't going to sponsor me.
right. So like, why do you do it? What's the
right? Because the elite is unachievable for me at my age. Just fact. What is the goal? Really? You know what? Again, like my most fun is I'm outside, which I love. I'm an outside girl. So I'm outside with a friend, at least, often with other random strangers who share a thing, who share this passion for doing this thing. Right? And for me, it is always playful, right? There's always that little bit of fear, sometimes a lot of fear, and seeing if can I do it? Right? It's like literally that, why am I there? Can I? That's the answer, right? But, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why climbing stuck and golf didn't, right? Because it could have been golf, but it wasn't.
You didn't try golf, did you?
Oh, fuck yeah. My dad loves golf.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. No, many, many times I was encouraged, we'll stay with that word, encouraged to play and to get good at it. And it isn't for me, even though it's also an individual sport, right? Because I'm better at individual sports than team sports.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. It's interesting, this idea of, like, why do you do a thing? It's so that you can expose yourself to basically to expose yourself to new things, right? To expose
Yeah.
yourself to new phenomena that you don't know how to handle, right? Like it's necessary,
Yes.
right? It's necessary. It's like the thing,
Uh-huh.
right? And that, I think, for me, is where we get into this idea of the philosopher swordsman.
Yeah, because novelty is required for fun. Like
It
again,
is required, yeah.
Science talks about this, right?
And I would also say that it's the nature of the philosopher, right? Like, so like if you go to college to try and get a degree in philosophy, which probably no one should do at this point, but like 6 people should actually do that. Everyone else should do something else.
So that they could be teachers eventually, so that there would still be philosophy classes for the other 6 people in the future. Yeah.
But anyway, like if you go to Philosophy 101 and the teacher says like, okay, I want you to write an essay on what philosophy is, right? You're probably not going to have a very good answer. But if maybe the same question was asked to a bunch of grad students, right? What is philosophy? What they're going to say is, looking at the novelty of the world and trying to make sense out of it.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what philosophy is trying to make sense out of things. Often we regard it as trying to make sense out of like the important things. Right. And we have, and like, or just even answering the question, what are the important things?
Yeah.
And then trying to make sense out of those, or trying to figure out how best to justify what it is that we believe, right? All of those, this is all the questions of philosophy, right? And so the philosopher swordsman is interested in asking questions that can't be answered in a contest, right? They can be answered through the practice of a contest.
The practice of contesting. Yeah.
Exactly. But they can't.
The contest itself gives you nothing.
Nothing.
But perhaps the practice of contesting could.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So or I mean, if what you're looking for is like who would win this contest on this day, right? But that's not an interesting question. Like that's not, a philosopher would be like,
not for me.
No.
Yeah.
That's not.
What a boring question.
Right? Like, or like, what's the best way to, and often the question is like, what's the best way to prepare for a contest? If that's your goal, that's a great question of philosophy.
Right. Well, and I would find myself, I'm not interested in who won, but I find myself eminently interested in how. Right?
Well, so
the winning is relevant, but again, it isn't the noun for me. I could give a shit about the noun. It's the verb,
I was having the conversation the other day with someone about what the tournament offered them in terms of their practice and sort of like why they felt like the tournament was the highest form of the practice. And they mentioned something about there's something about what did he say? He said you can't point to anything else, right? Like you can only point to the performance in that match, right? Like that's how I did, right? Like that's an objective criteria to measure my
it is a criteria.
It's right. So, but that's the thing, right? So,
but you know what it is? It's digital.
Yeah, exactly. It's digital. It's something that can be quantified. It's something that, right? But I just thought it was so funny because, like, I don't need that to know that I have deficiencies.
Right? My eyes open today. I know I have deficiencies.
Like, I can fence for 5 minutes and see something to work on.
Yeah.
right? Like I don't, or 5 minutes is not like that's I'm being conservative. Like I'm being ridiculously conservative. I can fence for 15 seconds and choose amongst a dozen things that I did that I would want to get better, that either I want to polish or just change or, add.
Have questions about,
or have questions about. Like I don't need my performance in a tournament to point out a deficiency. In fact, I look at tournament, or I look at that sort of contest. The only benefit that offers in terms of what questions we can answer is how I would perform under the constraints of that particular environment
on that day.
Right? So under the constraints of that particular environment, including like what I ate that morning, how much sleep I got, like everything, right? Yeah. So like, but as far as like what I do, and this gets back to that point that we made like a while ago. Someone posted a fencing clip. They're like, "I'm so proud I made this work." Right? Caught it on camera. I made this work. It's like, I mean, I'm proud of you too, but you don't know how to do it.
Right.
You don't know how to do it. If you made it work once and you got it on camera and you're grateful, then you don't know how to do it. You don't know how to do something until you can do it every time. And by the time you get there, you've gone through such rigorous amount of practice that you're bored with it and you're tired of seeing it, and you'd love to never see it again.
Right. Yes.
Right. And so like,
you know what? Like, oh my God. I mean, this. I had a recent visit with my bestie, and we were talking about people we knew back in the past, blah, blah, blah. And there was this guy in our high school who was like an elite level violin player, like went on to do fancy ass shit, right? Like worldwide fancy ass shit at like 17, right? And I remember once catching him. He was so deeply sad that he couldn't be a part of the social life of a normal average teenager. Mm. And he referred to his violin as that bitch. Mm. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, did he quit? Did he? No. I mean, he had the passion to do the thing, right? As far as I know, he's still doing the thing.
Right, but you don't.
It cost him. It cost him.
Yeah, so that gets. So we could talk. Obviously, there's more to talk about with regards to the Philosopher Swordsmen and a question of what the hell we're trying to do here. But I want to just hang out in this subject for a little bit, because there's like it's not getting better at something is not magic, right? Mm-hmm. Getting better at something is not magic.
It feels magical sometimes, but it
feels magical. And when we see it in other people, when we see the talent developed in other people, right? And we see the accelerated progress that other people make, we say to ourselves, magic. Like that's the only explanation, because I've been doing this. They were normal, just like me. I've been doing this all this time, and now all of a sudden they're like kicking my ass. What's going on, right? Yeah. But the truth is, there's a reason that they're kicking your ass, and it's not because they're just naturally gifted. In fact, the idea of choosing a practice based on the way that your attributes have prepared you for success initially is sort of it's dooming you to kind of failure, that or at least a wake-up call in the
right, because like when you look at like the body conformations of Olympians, it's always deviant, frankly, right? So there is something to that. Like you were just born with arms that are 6 inches longer than your legs. Like you're a weirdo and you're gonna dominate swimming butterfly. Cool. Right? But like,
well, the other thing,
rest of us aren't deviants.
but also like we tend to view aptitude, right, as part of that set of genetic attributes.
Right, and aptitude never is.
No, that's wrong. That is bad. Yeah. Like that. Yeah. Like I'm gonna be objective, and I'm gonna make a pronouncement. Like it is bad to think I don't play that game because I'm not good at it.
Right.
Right. You don't have to like it. Right. I'm not saying that you have to like everything you do.
Yeah.
But don't choose what you like and what you don't like based on how well you perform initially, based on the skills you bring to the table, because your brain can be molded and you can get good at anything. You just have to work at it. And and basing your, like, regarding yourself as being a practitioner or a good practitioner based on the amount of work that it takes you to get like better and better, or like better on a hierarchy, is really just trying to shortcut the process of getting good, which requires work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might as well pick the thing that requires the most work up front so that you get used to it, so that you get good at doing the work.
Because being practiced at what it is to do the work makes the work easier, even though it's still work. Let's not even play, right?
And that bitch, right?
That bitch. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And like I think this is relevant to what you're saying. I think about being a late teenager, early 20s, and how hard everything was. It was so hard. And it was because I didn't have a framework. I didn't understand how banks worked. I didn't understand. I was running with people that would steal my salary if I cashed my check and left it in my bedroom, right? I didn't understand that, that bureaucracies work a certain way and you got to figure it out and don't get emotionally invested in it and just dominate that motherfucker. And here's how you do it, right? And if you just do this, it goes easy,
Right.
and yeah, right. And so so now the work, while it's still work, I get really annoyed talking to my health insurance company, but I know exactly how to do it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It gets back to that sort of, at the risk of belaboring the point, it gets back to that sort of scrub mentality, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
What a scrub is somebody who wants to start a practice and find success without having to go through any work, like without having to develop any skills, without having to like grind, like, people poo-poo the word grind, right? All grind means is you're just putting in the time, right? Like putting in the requisite time. So you can call it a grind, and people say like you shouldn't call it a grind because that's sort of, there's an implication that it's, it sucks or whatever. Like, I don't know, it kind of sucks. Like, like you got to put the work in. And you being naturally, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about like 70% success, right? Like that's the learning place, which means 30% of the time you are not doing the thing. And depending on what practice you're on, not doing the thing might be, I fall off the wall 3 times out of 10, and that sucks.
Yeah, that sucks. Like, who wants to fall? Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you can, if you don't have the stomach for it, then there are other places you could go to develop yourself, right?
That's it.
You don't have to choose rock climbing. My daughter is very interested right now in becoming an MMA fighter. I don't know if
yeah, mention that. That's awesome. Go
it's super
kill
awesome. I'm excited for her. But she's done a lot of combat sports in her life, and she's very, very competent, very physically competent, super strong. But she's never done boxing. She's never gotten punched in the face. She's never got punched in the face. And so I told her, like, hey, I'm here for you. We'll get you trained up. I'll train you. I'm not, I don't have any bona fides with regards to kickboxing or striking arts. I've done lots of boxing in my life, but I wouldn't, I would go somewhere else to get her trained in that regard. But as far
For
as
sure.
grappling and wrestling and stuff like that, help her. But I was like, once we get you kickboxing, you get punched in the face a few times, then you'll decide whether or not you want to be an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people don't like getting punched in the face, and there's nothing wrong with that. Right? Like,
I mean, I'll do it, but I wouldn't sign up to be an MMA fighter.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Right? It's like you gotta learn. You gotta learn what you want.
Yeah.
And like a vision of being a boxer or an MMA fighter is romantic and beautiful and might be something that's appealing, but then the reality of getting punched in the face and the knowledge that like that's what it's gonna take.
Yeah, I don't want cauliflower ears. I'm sorry. I don't.
My son is always he's sometimes I think he puts in a little extra to try and develop his because it's a badge of honor.
It is a badge. I get it. It's not what I need.
But anyway, so the point is, or I wanted to talk real quick about like savants, right? And people who are sort of naturally gifted or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's research that's been done that even still that's not true. Like there are no such thing as savants. Like even Mozart didn't just write. Like Mozart grew up in a house with music in it every day, and he watched his father compose and play, and people coming in and out of the house that were playing music, and we have all of his work that he did leading up to whenever he was 6 or 7 or whatever. Like we have all of the trash that he turned in. You know what I'm saying? Like he didn't just wake up one day and write his 41st symphony.
Yes, there were conditions around him that set him up to have an, I'm going to say easier, even though I know we've already broken down that it isn't, but an easier pathway to that. Like, again, he wasn't going to become a fencer. Right.
Unless, like he could have been if he could have been grown up in that environment, right? So it's like,
but that's what I mean. Like that was the path of least resistance for him, given.
And he had some, he had a drive to mastery, right? Yep. Somehow he ended up being really passionate about dedicating himself to this practice. But that's the thing, right? What the real, I would say, if we're going to say that we're born with anything, right? I would say
we're born with a lot, but
we're born with a lot, but I guess if we're going to say that we're born with anything that naturally sort of compels us towards one practice or another, right? Or maybe naturally compels us towards elite performance, right? That it has more to do with passion and discipline than it does to anything else. Like, and I wouldn't even call it discipline almost, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not discipline; it's borderline obsession.
Yeah, hyper focus.
Right. Exactly. That's how you get good at something. Is you become obsessed with it, and you watch everybody who's ever done it over and over and over again to see the little details of what they do, and you're absorbing it through osmosis, and then you're practicing it, and then you're reading books about it. And there are better ways to do it, right? Like you can be hyper focused and you can have discipline and not really get anywhere because you're not doing the right things.
Yeah, because you're just spreading your energy out in less useful ways. Yeah.
Right. But that being said, right?
Yeah, and I think of, you're searching for a concept here, and I always think of Farmer Burns saying, be game, be game, and that he thinks gameness is the most important quality to have.
Yeah.
And I love that idea because really it's a willingness to put yourself in a place of discomfort again and again and again.
Did I send you that video of this guy?
Yeah, you did.
Right? I can't even do it, right? We'll maybe link it in the description.
Okay.
But yeah, that was such a great video. Like this, like, did you feel awkward when you were doing it? Right? Like, did you have to try and get your body? But that's what he was saying, right? Like, yeah, I know you did, bro. I did too. But like, did the question of, did you have to try and make it work?
Right.
Like, I think that's such an. I used to use this analogy when it came to swordsmanship, like giving a brand new student a sword, and all of a sudden all of their faculties fly out the window.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can no longer even comport their body. Like they can't even just stand. Right. Like, I'm surprised they're not falling down when you give them that. Right? It's like, why are you doing that? Stop doing that. Don't do anything.
It totally happens. It's so real.
But like, I used to say, like, if you walked in here and I said, don't touch that wall, like, I just want you to go the whole class and not touch that wall. Like, you could do that, right? But I put a sword in your hand and all of a sudden, you know what I mean? That used to be my no. But I like this one even better, right? It's like, I want to show you what it feels like to get good at something, what it feels like to start by not being good at it, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take you through the process of getting to where you can all of a sudden do it. And like, whenever we're fencing, or whenever we're developing ourselves in fencing or in rock climbing or in playing music or whatever, that we should be thinking about that process, right? Like, we should be thinking of that. Am I in that level of discomfort? And that's, again, why I only say 5 minutes a day. Right? Because 5 minutes, because an hour of that would be fucking excruciating.
Yeah, and diminishing gains. What's the point? Yeah.
Exactly. It would be excruciating, and you're not going to get, like, there's more fun that you could be having in your life.
For sure. For sure.
But can you give me 5 minutes of this? Right.
Right.
And try and get it to go faster, whatever it is that you're doing. Anyone can give me 5 minutes of that. And if you do that consistently over the course of 3 months, oh my God. Right. First of all, you're ready to move on past this after 4 days.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden you keep building and you keep stacking what you can do.
Yeah. And it's constant discomfort. And I know, trying to teach this, right, is challenging, because some people find that presentation of discomfort too uncomfortable, right? It is that, getting punched in the face thing. And so finding each person's tolerance level for discomfort is really, in my opinion, the difference between an incredible instructor and
I was just gonna say,
mediocre.
that's the art of coaching, right? Like, that's what there is an art in coaching, and most of the art of coaching has to do with being able to assess the requirements for the moment of that practice with that particular student.
Yep. And if a student walked in from just having a car wreck, they're going to be a different student than if they just walked in from getting a raise at their job, and you just gotta roll with all that.
That's been really important to me, right?
Yeah.
And my practice as a coach in both martial arts and in music, right? I'm both. And what I have found works the best, the thing that I've found the highest degree of success with, has to do with, first of all, sharing the method, right? And like communicating the method. What are we trying to do here? How are we trying to do it? And I don't mean fencing music. I mean learning. Like, we're trying to take ourselves from a place where we don't understand the domain and don't have any skills within it, to a place where we have a broad conception of the domain. We have macro senses of various skills within the domain. And then we have a program for development. And we have a way to measure our success. And we have a way to scale our training so that we can constantly reflect, and put ourselves in that optimal zone for training. And 70% is optimal for more than just like repetition or, you know, the correct amount of pressure. It's optimal because it motivates us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like 20% success could potentially get you closer to, I mean, it's certainly, if you tried to do a thing and you got it right 20% of the time, that wouldn't be a total waste of your time. You would be getting better at the skill.
Yeah.
So to some degree, right? Maybe not, but it would also be very defeating.
And risking injury, you know?
Well, sure, yeah, depending on the activity, right? If it's like
Yeah.
playing piano, maybe not so. Actually, no, that's not true. Piano.
No, that's not true. You absolutely would be risking injury.
Well, I learned piano for in college, and I hurt myself a bunch.
Yeah.
I think it was because of injuries that I sustained boxing. If you believe it or not. But
perfect. I love that.
So yeah, so giving people a sense to like say, where am I right now? Instead of being frustrated by being unable to perform a thing, right? The moment every single one of my students have a clear path to get them to a place where that frustration will go away. Right?
Yes.
It's like the moment anyone starts to be frustrated, and no one even gets frustrated anymore. Like I mean, I don't want to. I'm speaking very like haughtily right now, but it's just a reality. It's just a reality of my classes. Nobody gets frustrated when they can't do a thing. We all know why. Everybody in the room knows why, and we laugh about it because it's enough. Hey, look, there it is again, right? I'm not ready to do this thing yet. So I have to go back. And it's like, and everyone self-regulates because they have a clear program for doing that.
Because yes, and that framework released them from a framework they were maybe giving as a child, where their worth as a person was attached to success or failure at whatever given task they were doing.
At some objective wicket, right? Like some objective
metric. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And all you need is a new framework of this is what learning is, right? And again, novelty and discomfort are required for fun. So like you would not be having fun if you were just doing all the things with no effort and always doing it just right. Like who has fun writing their name? Nobody has fun writing their name, right?
Right.
Because you know you're gonna do it.
Right.
Who cares?
Yeah, it's just like I'm over it. Like I'm over it. And so yeah, exactly. Giving people, first of all, disassociating people from this sort of objective metric of success, which leads to whatever like piece of paper that we give you, right? Like, and letting them know that it's about their own progress, right? And then giving them a path to putting themselves in a place where they can optimize their own development, feel good about what they're doing, right? Feel engaged by the process, right? So not just feel good about their success, but be enthralled by their failure.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then so to circle it back, because we're basically done now.
Yeah, we are
talking about Philosopher Swordsmen, right? That's what swordsmanship has given to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because my practice of coaching music, right, has been deeply informed by swordsmanship, right? Like at this point, they're just inextricably linked. Like I can't think about one without thinking about the other, or all of the various ways of framing both.
Right.
So it was funny. I was teaching a group class on Sunday, and I talked about feeling. Right. So feeling is and then I had to come up with another word for indes. Like I don't have a a music word for indes.
Yeah.
Right? It's like in jazz, it's kind of pocket or
Sure.
or like being, you know, groove, but like but that's not the kind of music that I play. And, you know, and it's not, and that doesn't really describe what indes means, right? Feeling is half of a coin, right? Feeling is one side of a two-sided coin, and indes is the other side. And I wanted to just say the word indes to my music students.
Yeah.
But, and I will say that to like in a private lesson, but in a group, I just couldn't bring myself to be like.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Amazing.
But it's indes, right? It's feeling and indes. You need both of them, and you need that for music, and you need that for life. So anyway, all right. So next week, we're gonna talk about, like, we've described what both of us regard as like a really effective training paradigm.
Yeah.
There are lots of training paradigms.
So many.
And there are lots of ideas about what the best way to approach training is.
Yeah.
And there are like games, and there are what kind of games, how do you design the games, and then there's like drilling, and there's like all of the constraints and benefits and
rote memorization and immersion, and
so we're gonna go headlong into that next week, and we're gonna figure out what we want to do with our students and in our clubs, and what the best way of doing it is.
I love it. That sounds great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. We'll see you later.